All right, we're going to check in with Dr. Chris Labos about the story. Look, I know we've talked measles before. We got into a situation where we had cases, there was a bit of a spike, and then we thought, okay, it'll be taken care of. Well, got news now that Canada has lost its measles elimination status after 3 decades. So in other words, it wasn't even considered, I guess in the last 30 years, even an issue anymore, right? We'd eradicated measles. Well, we had, but they're back. So I want to talk about this because apparently this is kind of serious. Dr. Chris Labos, cardiologist, of course, who joins us regularly here on CJAD. You can also catch him, by the way, Sundays on weekends with Joanne Vrakas at 7:20. So let me start with this, Chris. I said this is a pretty big deal. I think for most people, they didn't even know we had this status. So why is it this important?
I think it's important because just being able to say that you eliminated measles from your country, like that is something, right? That is a significant public health achievement because we went from pre-vaccine, when we were getting tens of thousands of measles cases every year, to having zero. Now, we did have measles outbreaks over the past 27 years since we eliminated measles. That happened back in 98. But the outbreaks were always small. They were contained. They would last for maybe a few weeks to a few months. What happened now, this current outbreak, which really started last fall, so like October 2024, it's been going on for a year. And because we've had regular, sustained domestic transmission of measles for a complete year, that's the definition of having sustained measles, meaning that it is not eliminated in this country, it is circulating. And so it's not good for Canada. It's not a good look. We are the topic of international media talking about how we lost, the measles elimination status. So it's not a good day for public health. It's not a good day for Canada. And even if it is a bit of a symbolic blow, symbolic blows do matter. I mean, it is something that just highlights how we've sort of lost ground on this particular public health issue.
Well, I guess the obvious question is why and how did this happen? Is it simply a matter of people, when we started questioning, or some people started questioning vaccines, measles sort of got lumped into that same category?
Yeah, it is some of it. I mean, what was particularly driving the outbreak this time is that there were pockets of communities in Quebec, Ontario, Alberta, the provinces that were hardest hit, where you had very high rates of people who did not get vaccinated. So certain cultural communities, especially Ontario and Alberta, where this was not happening. And so measles is so infectious. It's one of the most infectious viruses that is out there. The minute you have pockets of people that are unvaccinated, it's able to spread in those communities. And once it gets a foothold, it's very hard to eliminate because it'll always find that unvaccinated person, make them sick, and then they can go and spread it. I mean, right. The metric we use is that one infected person can infect 9 other people, which is, pretty bad. Like very few other diseases are that infectious.
With respect, it's funny, we tend to live in a bit of a vacuum, I think, sometimes, right? We look at our own province and think about, there have been cases here, but this has been really across the country, right?
It has, and that's why the country has lost, measles elimination status. Like this outbreak started in New Brunswick, and then it hit Quebec and Ontario, and then it headed out west to the prairies, and Alberta was pretty hard hit. At one point, Alberta was the worst, was worse than the U.S., even when they were having their own outbreak down in Texas. So, I think this is the problem. Like, if you're just looking locally, you might think it's like, oh yeah, that happened like last year. Why are we still talking about it? This has been one giant year-long outbreak, and that's why when the PAHO had its meeting, we lost our measles elimination status.
So what's the message here to people out there? Because clearly there were people who decided, you know what, no, I'm not doing this vaccination measles, too bad, for whatever reason, maybe something they saw online, which, I don't know, gave them, doubt. Maybe it was RFK Jr. sort of, attack in the U.S. What's the message out there, Chris, to people now that we're seeing that, is it simple enough to say if you'd had the vaccine, we wouldn't be going through this?
Yeah, exactly. If you have 2 doses of the measles vaccine, you don't get measles. So if you were born prior to 1970, you probably had measles as a kid and you're not going to catch it again, so you're fine. If you got 2 doses of the measles vaccine, you're fine. You're not going to get sick. The real challenge is, number 1, the unvaccinated. Number 2, people born between 1970 and like 1996, because for a while we were only giving 1 dose of the measles vaccine. So case in point, when I was a kid, I only got 1 dose of the measles vaccine. And when measles was eliminated from this country, that wasn't that big a deal. But now you have a cohort of people that are sub-vaccinated that could still potentially get sick. And while we weren't really talking about catch-up doses for these 1-dosers, we have to start thinking about maybe making sure everybody gets their second dose to give them that lifelong immunity that you need. So it really is a 2-dose thing. So there is a segment of the population out there that needs their second dose and may not actually know it.
By the way, it's worth noting, again, I said we live in a bit of a vacuum. There are other countries around the world going through the same sort of situation. I mean, the note here says Bolivia, Brazil, Mexico, these countries also facing active outbreaks.
Oh yeah, and Europe has been terrible over the past year. The U.S. obviously had their own, but that's the thing. Like, we sometimes get very, very focused on our own little corner of the planet, and we forget what's going on. So measles is still a big threat. We could eliminate it again, like we've done it before. We can do it again, but it's going to take a sustained effort to make it happen. Because if we can go a year with no measles cases, well, we will regain that status of having eliminated measles. We just have to do it and make sure we keep up with it, because until we can eradicate measles globally, it always has the potential to come back if we let the vaccination rate fall.
To what I said earlier, Chris, this idea, I said vaccinations, and obviously people who are decided, no, they're anti-vaxxers now. You're a doctor. You must hear this from patients who you see. What do you tell them?
I think you just need to explain to them what the reality is. Most people are not frank anti-vaxxers. Most people have an issue. And, it could be cultural, it could be religious, it could be that they don't think measles is a big deal. That's a big one. A lot of people walk around saying measles is it's like chicken pox. It's one of the routine childhood illnesses. Everybody's supposed to get it and you'll be fine. And they don't realize that, go back to the 1940s, 1950s, before the vaccine was introduced. We used to have tens of thousands of cases. People would die of measles. Kids would die of measles. I mean, we had 2 babies die of measles in Canada this past year. We forget how dangerous this can be. And so vaccines, to some degree, always become victims of their own success. They are sometimes so successful that people think the diseases they prevent are not a big deal anymore. And that becomes a problem because people are like, measles is not a big deal. Yes, it is. Children will die if we allow it to continue to spread and infect multiple people every year.
And once you say that to a patient who's doubting that, does their sort of reaction change right away?
It depends. It depends why they're resistant to the idea of vaccination. Most people are not flagrantly opposed to vaccines. They are scared for one reason or another. And if they say, what about the autism? What about this? What about that? Mm-hmm. If you can address their concerns, you can do it. But it's very slow going because you have to do it one person at a time. And the problem that we have in the current healthcare system is that we just don't have time and we don't have enough personnel to address many of the concerns people have.
Fair enough. All right. So look, for people out there, and obviously if you have kids, let's remember, and I think you might repeat that again, just how contagious measles is, right? You have kids in school, small classes, it takes, one outbreak and you can knock out a whole class.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest outbreak we've ever had prior to this was 2011, I think. It was centered here in Quebec, and it was largely based on unvaccinated kids in schools because you take kids, you put them in a room with poor ventilation for 6 to 8 hours a day. Yeah, it's going to spread, and that's what happened. So it's really important to make sure your kids get vaccinated and that they got their 2 doses.
All right. I guess we'll leave it at that. You want to add anything to this? Because, again, for people who did not hear, just off the top, this idea that we have now, Canada, has lost its measles elimination status. This is a very, very big deal.
Yeah, it is. And while this is a big deal, we need to worry about the community as a whole. But for you as an individual, if you got 2 doses of the measles vaccine, you're going to be okay. So we have to keep those contradictory thoughts in our head at the same time.
Okay. And by the way, how far apart do you have to, if you're getting, sort of 2 vaccinations here, how far apart do they have to be typically?
Oh, debatable point. It varies province to province. Here in Quebec, we tend to do it at like 6 and 18 months, but it actually is different across provinces. But yeah, you want to give it at least a 6 to 12-month interval between the 2 doses.
Okay. And if, by the way, if you go into your local pharmacy, can you have that discussion with your pharmacist?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So then do it, because this is not good news for Canada today. Chris, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
Take good care. Dr. Chris Labos, who, by the way, you can hear, as I said, every Sunday with Joanne Vrakas at 7:20 a.m.
Seasoned gamer or just video game curious? This Week in Gaming is the podcast for you. We break down the latest in the world of video games, from basics to beyond. The hottest gaming news, insight, and industry leaders and more, weekly. Join me, Naomi Kyle, and stay ahead of the game with all the latest updates, even if you're a total newbie. Stream This Week in Gaming on the free iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.